Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Role of Registered Counsellors in South Africa webinar. I am your host, Mhlonyane, and I am an academic support advisor in the Student Support and Development Department on the online campus for SACAP, and I'm also a registered psychometrist. So I will now be taking us through our program. So firstly, Nabilah, who is our program coordinator on the Cape Town campus, will be taking us through the role and scope of a registered counsellor in South Africa, followed by Kirsten Harrison, our program coordinator on the Johannesburg campus, who will specifically be speaking into student characteristics and the selection program for our professional program at SACAP. And finally, Nolonwabo, one of our student support and development advisors on the Johannesburg campus, will share her very own BPsych experience at SACAP. So, without further ado, Nabilah, take it away.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Michelle, for such a lovely introduction. I must say, I felt quite honored to be invited to speak at this webinar this evening. I myself am a registered counsellor and I'm very passionate about this field, so I'm very happy to take this opportunity to share what I know and provide insight to anyone who's also thinking about becoming a registered counsellor. Before we get into the role and scope of practice of a registered counsellor, I think it is important to start by understanding what a registered counsellor is and why the category is important. Okay. So registered counsellors are psychological professionals who are registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa, also known as the HPCSA. They are qualified individuals who aim to, or qualified professionals who aim to provide psychosocial well-being services to individuals, families, groups, and communities. And I think that's probably the biggest focus of the role of the registered counsellor, is that it is situated at the community level. Registered counsellors are trained to be frontline mental health professionals, much like a mental health paramedic, who make psychological services more widely and easily accessible to all South Africans. And I think that despite the enormous need for broader access to mental health resources in South Africa, there are very few people who truly know the importance of the role of the registered counsellors in addressing mental health needs within the South African context. And by that same token, registered counsellors are key to building a viable and sustainable mental health care system in South Africa. Again, despite this importance, much of the potential of these foot soldiers remains under-recognized and therefore underutilized in South Africa, effectively sidelining the invaluable resources that are desperately needed to provide adequate mental health care services and counselling across South Africa. And I think this takes us onto the next point and the next slide that will detail why the category for registered counsellors was created. Okay. The role of the registered counsellor was created specifically to extend psychological services and make them accessible to the diverse South African population. And as I'm sure many of us here are able to recognize and acknowledge, South Africa is a diverse country with various cultural, social, and economic backgrounds. So registered counsellors are trained to understand and address the unique counselling needs of different communities and populations. I think this provides a solid foundation to understanding the importance of the role of registered counsellors and why their scope is so important within the South African context. I think we'll take a deeper look now at the role of a registered counsellor. Okay. So a registered counsellor, like I've said, conducts psychological and preventative interventions that focus on the promotion and enhancement of psychological well-being for individuals, families, groups, and communities. Registered counsellors differ from other categories of psychology in that they are psychological practitioners who perform psychological screening, basic assessment, and psychological interventions aimed specifically at enhancing personal daily functioning. The main function of a registered counsellor is to prevent, promote, intervene, and appropriately refer. On the next slide, we'll zoom in and explore the role of a registered counsellor at the preventative and promotional level. So at this level, The role of the registered counsellor, as we can see documented here, is quite broad, right? But also very specific in that the role entails providing preventative developmental counselling services and interventions. It involves screening and identifying mental health challenges. At the promotional and prevention level, it also requires that counsellors develop competency within psychometric assessments that fall within the scope of practice of a registered counsellor. They're also there to contain presenting difficulties and alleviate immediate distress, to provide support and assist in the restoration of effective daily functioning, to provide psychoeducation and promote mental health and psychosocial well-being. And an important part of our scope of practice is to work within multidisciplinary professional teams. In other words, we're never working in isolation. The scope of practice of a registered counsellor allows us to work alongside other mental health practitioners, such as psychologists, psychiatrists, even medical practitioners and social workers may form part of such a multidisciplinary team. And lastly, it is also within our scope to make appropriate referrals to professionals or other appropriate resources according to the guidelines of good practice within the healthcare profession. Here again, we can see the importance of the work registered counsellors do, which links very closely with the needs of the South African population. So on the next slide, we will look very lastly at just a little bit more in terms of the scope of practice of a registered counsellor. Okay, and I suppose to end off my segment, I do want to reiterate that registered counsellors are psychological practitioners who perform psychological screening, basic assessment, and psychological intervention with individuals and groups to enhance personal functioning. I do want to emphasize once more that registered counsellors work in a variety of community contexts, including NGOs, correctional services, district hospitals and hospices, consumer organizations, crisis and trauma centers, self-employment as a counsellor, schools and educational institutions, community programs and support facilities. You may also find a registered counsellor in the space of rehabilitation and addiction treatment programs, as well as support services for the South African Police Service. More specifically, the registered counsellor will manage complete sub-element intervention programs with associated interventions. They are involved in designing sub-elements of intervention programs and processes. Registered counsellors also execute less advanced but more structured interventions that may include presentations and workshops in terms of psychoeducation and mental health promotion. And lastly, these acts also fall within the scope of practice of a registered counsellor. And they are, like I said earlier on, being the first line of community-based psychological support, providing preventative and developmental counselling services and interventions on all system levels. Okay, registered counsellors also perform supportive psychological interventions to enhance personal functioning and mental well-being. They provide counselling in conjunction, like I said, with multidisciplinary support and psychoeducation. Okay, an important aspect of a registered counsellor's work is around documentation and report writing to provide feedback on client work. Okay, I think that I've covered quite a bit in terms of the role and scope of practice of a registered counsellor. And I think that, this kind of leads into why it is important to consider how these roles, not only relate to the day-to-day tasks of what a registered counsellor does, but also how these relate to you as a person and what kinds of qualities are needed to become a successful registered counsellor. And before I kind of move too far, I do want to hand over to my colleague Kirsten, who will take us through the selection process and elaborate a little bit more on the student characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Nabilah. I think it really does help give a little bit more context in terms of what actually is a registered counsellor and why is the role so important. So I do want to chat a little bit about SACAP's program, the BSAC program that leads to registration as a registered counsellor, what that route sort of looks like, as well as the selection process and highlighting the types of students that generally do very well in this program. So let's move to the next slide. So I think just to I guess piggyback off of what Nabilah was saying in terms of the mental health crisis in South Africa, I don't doubt that every single person on this call understands that, whether it is from their own experience or whether it is from witnessing family, friends going through similar things. I think when we look at the stats, it's actually quite scary to think about how many people are dealing with mental health, serious mental health concerns, and they are not receiving any treatment. If we look at the stats that are here from SADAG, it is really shocking to think that a large majority of our South African population, unfortunately, still in 2023 does not have access to these resources. Let's move to the next slide. So, as I mentioned before, I wanted to chat a little bit about the program that SACAP offers. So this is the Bachelor of Psychology degree. This is a 4-year program. It is full-time. We do only offer it in our Joburg and Cape Town campuses. So it does need to be face-to-face, in person. It's quite an intensive program. So it's a program that we don't offer on the online platform. And those that are in the program definitely understand why, because you need that hands-on classroom experience. And that's really what we look for with our BSAC program. And the program is really designed to prepare our students for a range of careers in psychology. It also does set them up for further studies if that's what they would like to do. Or alternatively, to be able to write the board exam with the HPCSA and register as a registered counsellor, which definitely does open up a lot of opportunities in the psychology space. And I think on that note, what I want to say is that when choosing to study psychology, it is really challenging because there are lots of options that are out there. There are tons of different programs, and I think what's really important is that there's a space for everyone in the profession. You just need to find what works for you. Where do you feel the most comfortable? Where do you see yourself fitting? I think that a lot of people have an idea of when you go into psychology, you need to be a clinical psychologist, and that's sort of it. That's the final stage to reach. But I think that you need to more focus on what are your skills, what do you want to do within this space, what are those goals you want to achieve, and that will help guide you in terms of choosing the correct program for you. There's no right or wrong choice in terms of program. It really does come down to what your interest areas are and what you would like to actually see yourself doing as more of the end goal. As with most of our programs, there is very much a big focus on the practical elements. So training our students to apply the information that they're learning. So we really aren't looking at regurgitating textbooks. We're really looking at, if you take the information, you take the theories, how does that make sense in real world experiences? How does that make sense in the South African context? That's very much what we're looking for here. Very important is that we can only accept 20 students per campus. So that's 20 for Joburg, 20 for Cape Town, and that's per year. And because it is a program that is quite popular, we do have to follow a selection process. And now what that selection process entails is first a paper-based selection. So if you are interested in applying, you would chat to your admissions officer and you would get the application. There you're required to submit a couple of documents as well as fill in the form and give us a bit more information about yourself. With that, our team goes through it, and from there, if you are successful in the paper-based screening, you do get invited for an interview. The interview is a panel style interview. It will be 2 people on the panel, 2 members of the academic team that will engage with you in terms of your motivation for applying for the program. What draws you to the program? Why do you feel that you're a good fit? What is your interest in community work? And what do you see yourself doing with the registered counsellor category? What do you, where do you really place yourself with that? And at the end of the day, it's very much trying to just get to know you to see if this would be a good fit for you. So that is definitely something that you can expect if this is the program that you are going to apply for. Let's move to the next slide. So this is just a summary of what Nabilah was talking about in terms of what registered counsellors can provide. So I'm not going to rehash what Nabilah did go through. What I do want to mention here is that it's important that you do research on what the category is and if it aligns to the work that you want to do. Remember that this category was created in order to make mental health care services accessible to the larger communities. And if that's something that you're passionate about, this may be the qualification for you. The candidates that we are looking for here, and we'll chat about them in the next slide, but it's quite specific in terms of characteristics. And we really want candidates that have done their research and are willing to commit to 4 years, because to be honest with you, it is difficult. And I don't know how else to put it, that the program is quite taxing. It's not impossible. And we'll hear a little bit later from Nolly, who has actually done the program herself, but it's not impossible, but it is quite challenging, and you need to be dedicated and you need to have that passion for wanting to do this. And that's what helps get you through. But let's move to the next slide so we can chat about some of the characteristics. So in terms of what we really look for, what has helped us to sort of have this criteria is that we've looked at students that really do succeed in the program. And these are some of the common characteristics that those students do have. And the first one is empathy. So really wanting to understand others, really wanting to be able to hear and connect with other people on a deep level. I think that at the forefront, that is something that is incredibly difficult to teach. It's something that, you can't do a course on it. It's something that, you need to develop as an individual within your space. So that's definitely something that we look for. Flexibility, very important. If we think about community-based work, you can have a schedule, you can have a workshop outline, and it can be step by step exactly what you need to do. But when it comes down to it on the day, sometimes things just don't go according to plan. And we find that students that are a little bit more flexible, that are able to kind of adapt, do really well in the program, because they are able to think on their feet and they don't let a setback really set them back. They're able to sort of bounce back from that. Of course, with working within the South African context, we need candidates to have an understanding of diversity as well as cultural sensitivity. You can't be working in a diverse country like South Africa and not be aware of your own biases, or not be aware of the different cultures, the different experiences, and the dynamics that come with that. So we really do look for candidates that are open also to sort of learn a lot about the different cultures that are out there. And I suppose the more you learn, the more there is to learn. So a key characteristic there is just teachability. That's what we're looking for. Open-mindedness and teachability. to add on to that, you know, even in our classroom space, we do find that our BPsych program does attract a lot of diverse individuals, and you can be in a classroom with, let's say you are freshly out of high school and you may be 18 turning 19, you can be with someone that is 45 that has decided to do a career change. Our students in these programs are very, very diverse in their experiences, in their stages of life, and as much as we talk about it in the field and sort of practicum and the work that you'll be doing with clients, it also plays out within the classroom space and how you connect with your peers. So that's also something that's important. Patience, crucial. Things don't always go according to plan, and we need to be able to be patient and understanding and just be able to pause. Communication skills, very important to put your hand up. Be able to put your hand up if you are struggling, if you are battling with something, because it is quite an intensive program. The organizational skills are needed there, time management, stress management, and I think most importantly, the willingness to reach out for help if you do find that you do battle a little bit with those areas. And I think at SACAP, we do have an entire department that is dedicated to support students academically and psychosocially. So the help is there. We are looking for candidates that will put their hand up and say, hang on, I'm not coping, I do need help. As well as commitment and passion. It's a long 4 years. It's a tough 4 years. And we are looking for candidates that are willing to commit to putting the program at the forefront for the 4 years, and to really, really position themselves like that. So that's just a summary of some of the characteristics that we have noted. Let's go to the next slide. So I did include this just very briefly to chat a little bit about the difference between a registered counsellor and a psychologist, because I'm sure there are a lot of people on the call that have perhaps heard the term registered counsellor for the first time, or are wondering what is the actual difference and what can you do. So firstly, the level of training is different. The scope of practice or the scope of profession is quite different in terms of what registered counsellors can do versus what psychologists can do, and the level of interventions that they can have with clients. So generally, when you are thinking about a registered counsellor, think back to what Nabilah was sharing. You're looking at short-term interventions. You're looking at assisting to improve clients' sort of life functioning in the different areas of their lives, whereas psychologists more work on the long term. They will definitely work a little bit more with psychopathology, diagnoses, and that's really what their focus would be. But registered counsellors have a strong passion for community-based work, and you really do find registered counsellors working on the grassroots level, working within NGOs, and just again, trying to make those mental health care services accessible to the larger public. The idea is that registered counsellors can bridge the gap. They can bridge that gap not only because we are hoping that there can be more registered counsellors in different areas. Registered counsellors are also a little bit more affordable. So we are hoping that registered counsellors bridge that gap and can work in collaboration with psychologists. I know that's quite a bit of information that we have sort of covered there, but I think that is at the end of my talk. So I do want to hand over to Nolly, and Nolly is one of, well, is a alumni of SACAP, and she did complete the program with us also at our Joburg campus. So really excited to have Nolly here. I'm going to hand over to you, Noel.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Good evening, everyone. I hope that everyone is good, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nolonwabo Mhlonyane, and I am a student support and wellness advisor, student support and development advisor on the Johannesburg campus. And I am a registered counselor. I am a registered counselor, and I completed my BPsych qualification through SACAP. So I am a SACAP alumni student. And before I start, I just want to tell you something about the lecturers at SACAP. They have a very unique method to teaching and learning in the classrooms. And a part of that is having an icebreaker at the beginning at the start of a new term in the first session. They would do an icebreaker in the start of the session, and part of that was asking students why they decided to do psychology. Like, why are you guys doing psychology? And each and every one of us in my cohort, we would share our different stories to why we are studying psychology, and my answer was always the same. I am studying psychology because a psychologist changed my life. So the reason why I'm having that introduction is because when you study BPsych, especially at SACAP, you have to be intentional about the profession. Why are you doing this? Why did you join? And why do you want to become a registered counselor? And that was also the case for me. I was very intentional about me studying psychology and what my professional journey will look like. So I think that leads me to my next point in terms of knowing your why. Your why will carry you through the entire profession. It's a very lengthy roller coaster ride. I mean, it is 4 years. 4 years of dedication, 4 years of consent, and especially with the BPsych, you can't just wake up one morning and decide to do something else, because it's a very fixed program, right? So it requires your 100% dedication, and that is exactly what I put towards my journey, right? And when you study BPsych at SACAP, it will open so many opportunities for you, because you will get quite a number of lecturers each and every term who will teach you the different modules. And what I did for me, I used my experience at SACAP to sort of like about what I wanted to do after the program. I knew that I wanted to work in corporate before I do my master's. So then I decided to network. I networked with the educators. I networked with my colleagues at the time. And I was also very active as a student. I was part of the student leadership team, and I was very active as a student on campus, engaging with other students, right? So that's why it is important to understand the different paths that this qualification will afford for you. Know what you want to do with the degree. After you are done doing your BPsych qualification, you need to know what you want to do with the qualification. Do you want to start your own private practice? Do you want to work at a hospital? Do you want to work in a community-based center? You need to know all of that before you even enroll to study your BPsych qualification. And during that time when I was studying, because I knew what I wanted to do in the beginning, I decided to also affiliate myself with other platforms that are outside the institution. I volunteered at SADAG, and I also volunteered at the Tears Foundation, just to broaden my knowledge about the field of psychology. Just like my previous colleagues have shared, that this qualification, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone will get an opportunity to design their journey, basically. So you will get to decide that this is what I want to do, and you can do just that. And lastly, I would like to encourage everyone to do their research. Research the institution that you want to study at. research the teaching and learning style of that institution, and also research the program so that you are well informed. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much to our team for sharing that invaluable information. That was super, super informative. And the time has come for our Q&A session. So to all of our attendees, if you have any questions which you maybe haven't been placed in the Q&A box yet, you are more than welcome to place them in the chat box now for our live answer session, which will be taking place shortly. Okay, so we can start with the few questions that we have received so far. So we have a question from Samantha, and she is asking, how long is a counseling course if a student already has an honors in psychology?
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the question. I'm sure there are many attendees here this evening probably wondering the same thing. And like Kirsten mentioned earlier, there are many pathways, many pathways within the field of psychology. And for any student who may already be holding an honors qualification or an undergraduate degree in psychology, the next course or the next step in becoming a registered counsellor would be a program like a B-Psych equivalent program, which at this point is 18 months long. Okay, I hope that answers the question. That is just another program that just requires applicants at the level of application to already be holding an undergrad or honors qualification to then enter into the B-Psych equivalence program in order to also become a registered counsellor. And to emphasize, that is an 18-month long program.
Thank you so much, Nabilah. If you could please maybe just stay on screen for us, because we have a few more questions which I think you would be able to answer. So we then have a question from Taryn, and she's asking, what is the selection process if she's doing the BSOC-Psy online to becoming a registered counsellor?
Perfect. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so the application for an applicant who holds an undergrad qualification already does require a paper-based application, which then gets reviewed, and a certain number of candidates are invited to a selection process, which for the B-Psych equivalence program would entail a selection week where there are a series of interviews with many individuals and academic members on the selection panel. Okay, so also similar to the process Kirsten mentioned earlier for the B-Psych, instead this is just a selection week instead of just a panel interview.
Thank you so much. That was very, very informative. And then we have another one for you from, I think it's Anine. How similar is this course to the 18-month B-Psych equivalent option? Thank you, Nabilah.
Okay, thank you. So the B-Psych program, like Kirsten mentioned, is a full-on 4-year program. So if we're thinking sort of in terms of, how we get to the 4 years, and just to clarify, that basically equates to what your normal 3-year undergraduate would be with your 1-year honors. That together makes up your 4-year B-Psych, and wouldn't require that you have an undergrad already in psychology coming into the program. The 18-month B-Psych program already sits at postgraduate level. So entry into your 18-month B-Psych equivalence program requires that applicants already hold an undergraduate or honors level qualification. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Nabilah. Very informative again. Thank you so much. Okay, then we have a few questions which Kirsten would be able to answer. Thank you so much, Kirsten. So the first question is from Claudette, and she's asking, if I already have an honors in counseling psychology with a university, what is the maximum number of credits that SACAP is willing to extend to her to convert her honors to a B-Psych program? Thank you, Kirsten.
Thanks, Michelle. That's quite a good question, because I'm sure there are a couple of people on the call. I've just been skimming through the Q&A, and I think there are a lot of people on the call that have an honours already, and I'm glad that Nabilah has chatted a little bit about BPsych equivalents. But the answer for this is that you cannot credit into a postgraduate or a professional training program. So it doesn't matter what sort of other qualification, honours qualification, NQF level 8 qualification you have. Unfortunately, there are no sort of ways to credit into a postgraduate or professional training program. So we call the BPsych and the BPsych equivalent a professional training program because it does lead to registration as a registered counsellor. So if you did do an honours, for example, you would need to still start our program right from the beginning, complete all of our modules from start to finish. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so very much, Kirsten. Okay, then we have another question for you from Taryn again. Okay, so she's asking, do I need to become a registered counsellor before becoming a psychologist?
Cool, thanks for that question. Again, I think that this is probably one that a few people are thinking about. And the answer is no, you don't. So you don't need to be a registered counsellor in order to be eligible to apply for a master's in psychology, so to become a psychologist. You can do that if you do, and I'm just going to make reference to the SACAP programs, obviously, because that's, you know, the first thing that comes to mind. So if you do the BPsych side, you do a academic honours, and then you go on and you apply for a master's in clinical or counselling psychology, you are more than eligible to do that. And just with that being said, when it comes to doing the BPsych and becoming a registered counsellor, it doesn't mean that you can't go on to study masters afterwards. So just for me to make that clarification as well. So you don't have to be a registered counsellor, but if you are a registered counsellor, it does not limit you or stop you from being able to do masters as well, if that's something that you want to do at a later stage.
Thank you again so much, Kirsten. Okay, then we have another one for you, which is, okay, so I'm just going to quickly read it. It's from Claudette. So, do we accommodate people that work full-time by offering evening classes? And then she's saying that our course is by no means inexpensive, so it is important that if the student is still being supported, sorry, the chat just quickly moved. Sorry, give me a second. Is still being supported by their parents, and they would then obviously need to support themselves as well financially. So she's basically just asking that from what she has seen, the classes are only during business hours, and I think she would just like to know what kind of accommodations could SACAP make for these types of students, if any. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Claudette, for that question. This is quite a tricky one because our classes are only offered in sort of business hours, and we do have our different slots throughout the day that we do have our classes. We don't have evening classes. Our last class is around kind of 4 o'clock, 4:30 to 6 o'clock, 6:30, around there. But there's no way to guarantee that a student would get those classes. So we don't have an evening study or a part-time or an online option for this program. It has to be in person, on campus, during the day. Reason being as well is that it is quite an intensive program. So we generally don't recommend that our candidates are working while they are doing the program, just because the requirements are a lot, to be honest. I don't want to sugarcoat anything, just to be honest, it is a lot, and it does require a lot of your time, a lot of your energy. And yeah, we definitely don't recommend that candidates are even working while doing the program. But unfortunately, to go back to that question, no, we don't offer any evening classes for this program, or online classes for this program.
Thank you, Kirsten. That definitely makes sense. Okay, Nabilah, we have another question for you from Samantha. So she's asking, please could we inform them as to why they cannot carry over credits for the BPsych equivalent program if you already have an honours degree in psychology? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Another common question that we get asked quite often. So the fact that students cannot, or applicants cannot, be credited into the program, like Kirsten has said, is in place for multiple reasons. Firstly, the BPsych and BPsych equivalence programs are accredited by the HPCSA. The HPCSA does require that all applicants and students who get accepted into the program are registered on their database as student registered counsellors from the beginning of their qualification. This is part of the reason why students cannot get credited into the program. They need to do the program from beginning to end. This is the HPCSA's guide, like I said, because applicants or students in the program do need to be registered and allocated with a student registered counsellor number from the beginning of their studies and be on the HPCSA's database before entering the practicum or work integrated learning space towards the end of both the BPsych and BPsych equivalence programs.
Thank you so much, Nabilah. That definitely is informative. Kirsten, could you please come on screen? We have another question for you. And they're asking, does this count as an undergrad or an honours degree? So does this program count as an undergrad or honours degree? Thank you, Kirsten.
So the BPsych program, the 4-year program, and I do just want to make a distinction that we're not talking about the 18-month BPsych equivalent program, because I think there's a lot of questions about the equiv program, but just to go back to the BPsych, the 4-year program, it is an honours equivalent, meaning that you exit on an NQF level 8, which means that you are eligible to apply then for NQF level 9 studies, which is your master's studies. So it would consider, I mean, I suppose it's a combination of undergrad and postgraduate studies in one.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Okay, so in the meantime, I can also see that there is a question which I will be answering relating to psychometric assessment, particularly as a registered counsellor. And we do have a question in terms of how can registered counsellors really be involved with psychometric testing? So once you are registered, you will see that there is actually a list on the HPCSA's website that actually explains and kind of summarizes the different tests that are recognized that psychometrists or registered counsellors can administer. But the field of psychometry really is broad, and as a component of your BPsych or BPsych equivalent program, you would have a module that would speak into psychometric assessments and psychometric testing and those types of things. So basically, as long as that test falls under the scope which is outlined on the HPCSA or outlined by them, you may be in the position to administer these tests. However, there are a few disclaimers that you will always need to take into account. So for example, there might be specific tests that you would maybe need specific accreditation in. There are some more lengthy tests. So for example, the Myers-Briggs or any more lengthy type of test, you might then need to go for additional accreditation in those specific tests. But you do find that many psychometrists or even registered counsellors would then actually perform these tests under supervision of a psychologist, which is also a way in which you can administer certain types of psychometric testing. And as I have indicated, psychometric testing is very broad. It can range from organizational to aptitude tests to like any type of cognitive impairment that people might have in the medical legal space and those types of things. So this program definitely does open a wide range of different opportunities for those of you who do register. Okay, so I would just like to see any other types of questions that we have indicated would be answered. So I do see that some of our team are typing answers in the chat. Okay. Okay, Kirsten, we have a question for you, if you could please come on screen. So about the 18-month course, what is overall being looked at when considering the selection process in regards to what years of study will be taken into account? So then the example given is only final year marks or all marks throughout the years of study and community engagement and service hours. And then they further went on to ask, is there confidence in adding a master's program in the future by doing this program? Thank you, Kirsten.
Very good question. In terms of the selection, so for this, we're talking about the 18-month BSAC equivalent program. So we do have a selection week, but let me just first start by saying that it's a paper-based screening, and then we select candidates to come to the selection week. So if you apply, you don't automatically go to the selection week. We do pick our top 50, and we invite 50 candidates to come to the selection week. In the selection week, you can expect to have one-on-one interviews. You can expect to have panel interviews. You can expect to have group discussions and group activities with others in smaller groups and larger groups. There are a number of activities that are designed to pick the most appropriate and candidates for the program. In terms of grades, so when you are applying if you are applying to be eligible for the program, we do look at your third year psychology modules. So it's really important that, because it is a counseling program, that you have to have psychology majors in your exit year, and that's what we do look at there. But grades are not the only thing. Grades are more of your paper-based screening, to be honest with you, and the selection is more about you as a person. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? What does it mean to you? What have you been involved in before? What has some of that outreach looked like? I think the most important thing for us is, because we can only take a set number of students per year per campus, we want to make sure that we're giving the students that really want to be change makers on a community grassroots level an opportunity to do the program. Michelle, I know that there were like a couple of questions in that one question. I hope I did answer everything.
I think you did, Kirsten. Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, then we have another question for you. So I just want to see, is there any way to start BPsych in third year if you have a related degree in healthcare?
So that's a quick one, and that would be a no. So it is important that you would have to apply for the program, submit all of your transcripts and all of the information that you do have. And our admissions team, they're the best to be able to tell you, what your options are. But generally, we don't have students that are crediting into the BPsych program based on other studies that they have done, because the BPsych program is so specific. It is so specific, and it does have that strong community focus. I suppose the only one would be for us to consider is, a candidate doing BPsych modules at a different institution wanting to transfer to our institution, and we would look at the module descriptors and maybe look at that. But long story short, in a nutshell, no, you would have to then apply and do the program from the beginning.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Nabilah, we have a question for you. So the attendee is saying that the BPsych equivalent program is 18 months, 6 months of which you are registered as, sorry, the chat keeps hopping. So 6 months of which you are a registered student counsellor. So they are then asking, could you do the 6 months students practical in any city or town, or must it be in Cape Town or Johannesburg?
Okay, thank you, Michelle, for the question. So, like I said earlier on, students are registered from the beginning of their qualifications as student registered counsellor. However, if I understand the question correctly, then the attendee is referring to the practicum component of the BPsych equivalent program. Okay, so students are out in the field for 2 academic terms, which is roughly 6 months long. Ideally, because the BPsych equivalent program is offered on the Cape Town and the Johannesburg campus, as well as the Pretoria campus, ideally we would like students to be placed at placement sites within. Part of this reason is because the practicum doesn't just involve students being out in the field working at the community placement site, but it does involve some work on campus as well. So there are particular days and times where we've got things like group supervision, where there are workshops, where there are case presentations, or any other activities that take place on campus. Therefore, it is not an online qualification. It is a program that can only be done on campus because there are components of even the practicum that would require students to be in class and on campus. Alluded to earlier, psychometrics is part of the scope of practice where students do get training. As student registered counselors in the field, students would also be required to make use of psychometric test material, which would be available, for use from campus. So that is part of the reason why ideally we'd like students in practicum to be placed within the same city. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Nabilah. It definitely does. I see that there are many questions in the Q&A box, which is, we really appreciate the level of engagement that you guys are, holding with us today, and really just getting involved and asking all the questions that you do have. And I'm very grateful that you are using the space for it, but we might not be able to get to all of your questions. But if we don't, we will be referring you to our admissions officers. But in the meantime, I can see that we do have another question for Kirsten. So I do think that you have touched on this already, Kirsten, but they are asking and saying that they currently hold a BA in health science and social services degree in counseling psychology, and they have been working in corporate for years while studying, and they find themselves kind of stuck as they would like to become a registered counsellor. So they are asking, what options are there for someone to continue working and to achieve this qualification? And yeah, so if you could please answer that, Kirsten. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Sure. I think there are definitely a lot of people that can relate to this specific situation. And I even think about some of my current students being in the corporate space, having that passion for psychology, having that passion for counseling, but not really being able to find a way to get in to the field in terms of making it into a career, making it into a business. So I definitely hear that. So what I would recommend for this attendee is to chat to our admissions team and to submit all transcripts. The admissions team would be able to look at your majors, and they would be able to advise which programs you would actually be eligible for, because perhaps if you do have some psychology modules on your exit level, so your year 3, you may be eligible for the BPsych equivalent. However, just for me to say, it's very difficult to continue working and achieve the qualification. And I'm not saying that to sort of demotivate anyone. I'm just saying that to be realistic in terms of what the requirements of the course are. So we don't have a flexible mode of study for this, specifically because you won't find any qualification that leads to a professional registration that is part-time or flexible, in the sense that you wouldn't have to, let's say distance learning or something like that. When it does lead to professional registration with the HPCSA, we do need to look at full-time. We do need to look at those practicums being at your placement site. There is no way that we can kind of make that hybrid, because at the end of the day, we do need to make sure that our students are meeting all of the criteria to successfully be part of the profession. So it's more than just doing a course. It really is immersing yourself in the psychology space. So yeah, I mean, I know that is quite a lot, but bottom line is, chat to the admissions team. You won't lose anything by submitting your transcripts to them and allowing them to see what programs you are eligible for.
Thank you so much, Kirst. While I have you, there's another question. So the attendee is asking, so they said, I'll be studying a Bachelor of Social Science Honours in Psychology at SACAP in Durban. Their goal is to be a registered counsellor, as this is obviously, it is required to empower their clients through appropriate referral, etc. So they're then asking, So they're saying that this course does not, however, empower them to become a registered counsellor with the HPCSA. And then they're asking if you have any advice on that. Thank you, Kirsten.
A difficult one. But what I would say is that there is nothing stopping you from being involved in community-based work already. You just won't have the registration as a registered counsellor, you know, in terms of the profession and be registered with the HPCSA, but nothing stops you from volunteering at an organization that does align with your interest areas. There's nothing that is stopping you from that. Alternatively, though, if you do and strongly feel that you want to be a registered counsellor, you're going to need to do the BSAC equivalent qualification. There is no way to kind of convert the honours or sort of do an add-on or an additional module. You have to do it from start to finish, unfortunately. So my advice there, I think it's Nina that asked that, my advice there is to really think about where you see yourself and what you want to do and how you can make the most out of the opportunities and the options that are there, and make sure that you pick an option that is right for you and aligns with your sort of your end goal.
Beautiful, Kirsten. Thank you. Another one for you. So the attendee is indicating that they are a mature student who just started the BAPSOC Psy program part-time so that they could keep working, but they are not in Cape Town or Johannesburg. So they are then asking, could they potentially progress to clinical psychology through an honours and masters after the BAPSOC Psy program through SACAP outside of Johannesburg or Cape Town?
So definitely, I mean, if you complete the BAPSOC program, you become eligible for an honours program, and you can apply for our academic honours, and that can be on the online platform. So that will be our online flexi. And from there, you know, if you meet all of the requirements, and once you complete that qualification, you become eligible to apply for any master's program in the psychology space, as long as you meet the entry requirements for that institution or that specific program. So it definitely does open that door, that once you finish that qualification, you would be able to apply for others. It doesn't have to be in Joburg or Cape Town.
Thank you so much. And then another one for you. So what can be the next step after studying for a diploma in counselling communication skills in order to become a full registered counsellor?
So with that one, what you would need to do if you already are enrolled at SACAP, so if you have done the diploma in counselling communication skills, I'm going to assume that you are a SACAP student, you need to speak to your student admin team. So depending on which campus you are on, you would have your student administrators. My suggestion is to chat to one of them. They can look at your transcript, they can look to see if you're eligible in order to apply for that program. However, you will have to still go through a selection process. You will still have to go through all of that. That is something that's there in order to go to the 4-year B side. However, if you've done the diploma and you want to do the BAPSOC side, you can do that for 3 years. After that, you can apply for the BSAC equivalent, which is after that. So there are some options. Because you are a SACAP student, chat to your student admin team that's on your campus.
Thank you so much. And then we have another question for you from Miriam. What are the differences between the BSOC Psy, the Bachelor's of Social Sciences degree majoring in psychology and counselling, and then the B Psych degree in terms of theory work?
So there are some modules that are the same in terms of content, and there are some modules that are completely different. And what I mean by this is that in the BSAC program, all of our educators position the module in a way that it does speak to the registered counsellor scope and the work that registered counsellors would do. So even though content-wise, it may be a similar module to what, let's say, the BAPSOC students are doing, it is positioned and taught in a different way. Alongside that, one of the biggest differences is that in the BPsych program, you learn about psychometrics and you learn how to actually administer psychometrics and how that forms part of your sort of scope, as well as a big focus on community-based modules. So your needs assessment, how to actually go about formulating these projects within a community space. As you sort of progress up the years, those are the modules that differ quite a lot from the BPsych program, as well as the practicum. I mean, the practicum is a full-time 6-month module. I suppose we can call it a module because there are those academic requirements there, but where you are placed at an organization and you essentially full-time working there. Another difference is that you do a research thesis, which you don't do in the BPsych. So there are a number of differences, but just to say that even if they are similar modules, they are positioned and taught in a different way by the educators.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Nabilah, we have a question that you might answer for us, please. So they're asking, in the 18-month course, how many days per week does one have to be in person in class, and how many days are self-study? Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the question. So again, just to clarify, we're talking about the BPsych equivalence program. So it is offered as a full-time program. By that, it means that every academic term, students would have a minimum of 3 academic modules. Okay, that translates to about 3 classes per week. Okay, there may be a term or two where students may have 4 modules, and that would mean that there would be weeks or terms that students will be required to be on campus 4 times per week for each of those classes. And what I do want to emphasize, though, is that this is completely dependent on the study plan, which may change. Okay. Also, I want to emphasize that the actual class days and class times also change term on term, which at the moment is 10 weeks long. So one academic term is 10 weeks long. So for every 10 weeks, your class day and your class time will change. Okay, Kirsten did briefly mention earlier on more or less what these class time slots are. But in any given term, 3 to 4 modules, which would require students to be on campus about 3 to 4 times, depending on the number of modules. The part of the question around self-study. So how our modules work is that there is what we call a credit value attached to each of the modules, which is shared with students at the beginning of every term for each module. What this means is that the credit value relates to notional hours, which when translated equates to the number of working hours for that module. Okay, so let's say you've got a module that is 12 credits, as an example. That translates into 120 working hours or notional hours. And what this means for a student is that that module would require 120 hours worth of work. Part of those hours are spent in the classroom. The other part is made up of activities outside of the class, whether it be attending to reading material, whether it be research for assignments, whether it be engaging in any kind of activities or exercises provided by the educator. I hope that answers the questions. But just to summarize again, 3 to 4 classes per term, 3 to 4 classes or days per week, and the number of hours is dependent on the credit value, and that is indicated to students at the beginning of each term.
Thank you so much. Kirsten, we have a question for you, and they are asking that if you have not made the selection process, are you then notified?
Yeah, That's a quick one, Michelle. The answer is yes, you do get an outcome. You don't get feedback. That is SACAP's policy, and that is aligned with many, many other institutions' policies, but you will get an outcome whether you have been successful in your application, unsuccessful, or if you have been placed on a waiting list. So don't worry, we don't ghost you in terms of your application. We will let you know what the outcome is.
Short and sweet, Kirsten, thank you. Then another one for you, please, from Samantha. So she's asking, with regards to carrying over of credits, what makes this program different to other programs that do allow you to carry over credits from an honours degree to a BPsych equivalent program? I believe you have touched on it already, but if you could maybe just elaborate a bit, please.
Sure. So I think, Samantha, for me to say that it's not a SACAP policy, it's actually the Council of Higher Education's policy that you can't credit into a postgraduate or professional training program. So there actually wouldn't be another institution that would allow you to carry those credits into a BPsych equivalent qualification. It may be something different, it may be a different qualification, but there are only a number of institutions that actually offer the BPsych equivalent. But yeah, in a nutshell, it's not a SACAP requirement. It's actually one that we are adhering to from the CHE, the Council of Higher Education.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Then we have another question for you from Ryan, and he's asking that in your experience, have you felt a lack of skills in the spheres of trauma and addiction that you hope future healthcare workers can learn sooner?
So definitely I did see this question, and I do think that there is such a need for those critical skills, and that is largely again why the BPsych and the BPsych equivalent and the registered counsellor category kind of exists, is because we need people that can actually mobilize those sort of treatment plans. They can mobilize those skills and those psychoeducational workshops and things like that. That's what we're actually looking for. So definitely I have found that in my practice that it is, it is very challenging, where there is a lack of education around some of these critical concepts. And I think our hope, especially as SACAP, is that we can have candidates that are willing to kind of go through the proper processes and learn the theory and go through the practicals and really gain that knowledge and go out and fill those gaps. I think that's really what we're looking for.
So we have a question in terms of starting your own counselling practice with the BPsych equivalent program. They're asking if that is something that you can in fact do.
Absolutely. So that is definitely something that you can do, whether you do the BPsych or you do the BPsych equivalent. As soon as you write the board exam, pass the board exam, you are eligible then to register as a registered counsellor. And what that means is that you have independent practice. So you don't have to be supervised formally by anyone. You are able to open up your own practice and practice independently. Obviously, we do recommend supervision, but it's not like other professions where you kind of have to work under someone for a period of time. The HPCSA sees the sort of internship as enough, kind of working under that supervision space. So you would be eligible then to open up your own practice and start working in that space.
Thank you very much. Then another one for you, please. So when it comes to referrals, can applicants or candidates, can they use social workers and psychologists, or do they only recognize registered counsellors when accepting referrals for the application process?
Thanks, Michelle. I think this would be for your referee forms, right? That's what I'm assuming from that. It would be, those. So that doesn't have to be from a registered counsellor at all, you do pick your 2 people, and generally you want people that are going to be able to speak into your strengths and sometimes even your weaknesses. That is important to bring that to light. But it doesn't have to be a registered counsellor that completes that. I mean, that can be your own psychologist, that can be anyone in your life really, but obviously not your sort of family or friends. We are talking about people that know you in a professional context. So yeah, absolutely, it can be other professions.
Thank you so much. And then we have another question. If any one of you could please answer this one. I think it's quite an interesting question. So they're saying that counselors and psychologists work hand in hand, but a counselor cannot do a psychologist's job in terms of diagnosing a mental disorder. So they're then asking, how does a counselor know basically when they can offer general counseling, or when they can, or when they should rather actually refer that individual, their client, to a psychologist? If someone could please answer that one.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to answer this one, and then if anyone wants to jump in, they're welcome to. So the nutshell answer is that that's why you need to go through the training, because this is what we actually teach in the training, is how do you understand your scope, how do you understand what you are allowed and aren't allowed to deal with, and that's how you learn. It's all taught in the program. So of course, it would be a question if you haven't gone through the program, because that's what the intensive training is about knowing when do you refer, what are some of those warning signs. We teach you about screening. So you screen for mental health disorders. I mean, that is a huge part of the registered counsellor scope, is screening and referral. So that is something that you learn throughout the years of your study.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Then we have a question specifically relating to the HPCSA board exam. So I am comfortable to maybe just speak into my experience as a psychometrist just in general. So the question relates to the board exam and, for example, are there fees? So there is an application fee that you would then need to pay before you can actually take the board exam. And then once you do pass the board exam, you would then also need to pay a fee to actually register as a professional. But in terms of it being internationally recognized, so South African healthcare workers do generally have a fairly good kind of reputation across other countries. However, it will depend on the specific country that you might want to go to. So it would depend on their healthcare system and what their requirements are. There might, for example, be a requirement where you might need to do like an entrance exam or something along those lines. But when I did my board exam, I know that the pass rate was 70%, but that may be different now. So I just wanted to quickly speak into that. And then we have another question for Kirsten in terms of the different programs. So they're asking between the B-Psych and then the B-Psych equivalent program, and they just want to know the difference between the two terms. Thanks, Kirsten.
That's a really good question, because I think we have this evening spoken quite a bit about the different programs. So let's just make a clear distinction. So when we are talking about the B-Psych, we're talking about the Bachelor of Psychology program. We're talking about 4 years full-time on campus, okay? That is where you start off with an NQF level 5, and then you end off with an NQF level 8. Then when we're looking at the B-Psych equivalent program, this means to apply for this program, you have to have an undergrad. You already have to have a bachelor of, I mean, it could be a BA, it could be, you have to have a 3-year degree. That's what you need to have. And with that, you need to have majors in psychology in your exit level, which is your 3rd and final year. And then that program is 18 months full-time on campus. Another difference is the 4-year program. We only offer that Joburg and Cape Town. The 18-month B-Psych equivalent program, we offer that Cape Town, Joburg, and Pretoria. So those are the main differences there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm just quickly having a read through the remaining questions. Okay, so I don't know if someone maybe wants to answer this, Kirsten, or Kirsten, if you could please maybe answer this as well. So does the BPsych or BPsych equivalent program allow for any specialization during study? That's quite an interesting one. If you could maybe touch on that.
That is quite interesting. So it already is a specialized program. So you can't sort of specialize further than what it is, how it is kind of set up. So it's specialized because it is a professional training program, and it does have the focus on community work. So in terms of specialization, it already is a specialized program.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And okay, then another one for you, please. So we have a question from Caroline, and she's asking, can she apply to write the board exam to become a registered counsellor without doing practicum, as she is already a registered psychometrist?
It's a quick one. It's a no. So although to be a psychometrist is also a BPsych program, and Mish, you will know this quite well because you did do the psychometry side of it. It's basically like your BPsych branches out into two. You have psychometry and you have registered counsellor. If you've done the psychometry, you can't sort of just register as the registered counsellor, and vice versa. Just because you've done the RC doesn't mean that you can register as a psychometrist. So no. Even if you are, and one of my current students is actually a psychometrist, and she's doing the equip program, and she needed to start right from the beginning, meet all the criteria for the BPsych equivalent program in order for her to actually get the qualification.
Thank you so much. I might just want to quickly expand on that as well. And for those of you who are maybe interested in psychometry, who have an academic honors, which would be the Bachelor's of Social Science in Psychology, so an honors in psychology, the academic program, there is a route through which you can then, once you've completed your honors, you can then, for example, go and do the BPsych portion, which is specific to the psychometry program. So then it kind of is equivalent to the 18 months that you would do in the BPsych equivalent program. However, the difference is that that is one thing that you can do with your academic honors, and then with your remaining 6 months, which is how long the psychometry program would take, you can then register as a registered psychometrist. But then that doesn't relate to any form of registered counseling type of scope. So yeah, there is just that distinction that I think is important. That is the route I took, and was very interesting. And it's also, it is a nice way to get your registration if that is something that you don't want to consider, if you can't, for example, do the BPsych or the BPsych equivalents. And then we have another question. So this is also quite an interesting one. Kirsten, if you could please touch on this one. So they're asking, is it possible for me to go through the BPsych program and not successfully be acknowledged as a registered counsellor?
So that is an interesting one, and the answer is yes. Because if you do the BPsych program and you fail the board exam, you can't register as a registered counsellor. That's what it comes down to. So our program makes you eligible to write the board exam, but if you don't pass the board exam, you have to keep writing it until you pass it to call yourself and be registered with the profession as a registered counsellor.
Thank you so much. Okay, so then we have another one for you, please, where Bridget is asking and saying that she has a degree in psychological counseling and has been struggling to gain acceptance to do honors and BPsych equivalents. They're then saying that my 3rd year level results are below 60. So she's then asking, is there anything that she can do to be able to gain acceptance into the program?
So that is a tough one. That is a tough one because you need to meet the minimum entry requirements, what we call the MER. You have to be able to meet those in order to apply. There is no way to sort of do additional work to be considered. I'm not sure if there's anyone else that's on the call that maybe wants to speak into it from an admissions perspective, but as far as I'm aware, you know, if you don't meet that MER, unfortunately, you won't make it past the paper screening.
Thank you, Kirsten. That is a tough one, but it is good to be aware of. Okay, so as I have indicated, the engagement has been wonderful. So thank you so much to all of our attendees for all of their engagements, and to our panelists for answering all these questions. I think there really is a lot of information that has been shared here tonight, and I think that it is very informative, and I hope that you do actually have a much better understanding of this program or these programs, and, you know, the way about going forward if this is something that you want to do. But if we didn't answer your questions, because again, we have had many and we are very grateful for the engagement, but if you would like our team to contact you, please feel free to leave your email address and then the query or the question that you have in the chat box, in the Q&A chat box, and our admissions team will be in contact with you. And we would also like to encourage you to please follow us on social media. So we have multiple social media platforms, but it is a great opportunity for you to stay up to date on any upcoming events or program launches that we might have, and any updates, as well as to actually access this recording so you can refer back to it at a later stage. But thank you so much. Thank you so very much to everybody that was here tonight. Thank you for sitting with us and for taking in the information. Thank you for our panelists for their wonderful insights. And we just really appreciate that you joined us this evening, and we wish you a wonderful evening further. Thank you so much.